right. Good morning. Good morning. Good to see everyone. So I'm Pastor Alex, and let's just jump right into it. If you were here last week, then you know that we started a new series this month, and it's called Going Against the Grain. And this series is all about a journey through the book of Daniel, recognizing that what's going on in the stories that we find here are just incredibly relevant for what the church is going through today. It's not honestly new to what we're experiencing today. It's just true that for thousands of years, the people of God have often been surrounded by and completely immersed in cultures that don't identify as people of God. And so a lot of times we feel like outsiders or exiles or just different, or like we don't fit in, and it becomes a question that we have to answer of what does it look like for us to be the people of God, for us to serve and follow our God when we have leaders and rulers and friends and family and just people all around us who aren't Christians, who are people that don't follow God and possibly even don't even want to follow God. And that's what this series is all about. And so we're going to just jump in and we're going to read chapter 2, which has a pretty entertaining story. And so we're not going to have it on the screen because it's just a little bit too long. So we invite you to read along your Bible or on your phone if you'd like to do it that way. Or if you don't want to do that, what I encourage you is while I'm reading this, just turn on your imagination. A lot of us have heard these stories before, maybe in other churches. Some of us, if we've been around the church for a long time, maybe we heard them as little kids. And it's easy to miss what's going on in this story when we think we already know it. But the truth is, if we haven't heard these stories since we were kids, then we'll find that as adults, when we look back into what's going on and we really read between the lines, that these aren't actually kid stories. Now, I'm glad that we, teach Bible stories to kids, by all means. However, it's important that as adults, that we read these stories and we see the deep meaning that it has for our lives, and especially for us as Christians, as it helps inform and equip us to be able to follow God in a world that is not following God. So, all that to say, listen and let this story just be as fresh as it can be. So, here we go. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, "I have had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means." Then the astrologers answered the king, "May the king live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will interpret it." The king replied to the astrologers, "This is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you will receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So tell me the dream and interpret it for me." So let's stop for a second. This part of the story is no accident. It is here for a very intentional reason. Right now we are learning what kind of king, what kind of ruler Nebuchadnezzar is. Now, do you see how absurd this is? Like this isn't just Bible-ese of like, yeah, weird things happen all the time, but whatever. Like, no, this is absurd. He's asking the people of his court to interpret a dream for him, which sure, we see in the Bible all the time. We might even do that today and ask friends, "Hey, I had this weird dream, what's going on?" But even today, when we ask our friends, "I had this weird dream, what do you think is happening?" we tell them what the dream is, right? Nebuchadnezzar's not doing that. And that's not just a weird thing in the Bible. Like, this is absurd. Nebuchadnezzar is demanding that these people do something that we would think is impossible. And it's not just that he's asking them to do something that is impossible and outrageous, but notice, he, just drunk on power, knowing that he's the king and that he can do whatever he wants and no one can stop him, threatens their lives. Did you see that? they have to not only interpret the dream, but they have to figure out what it is on their own without him telling them. And if they don't, they will die. Nebuchadnezzar is powerful, and he is full of pride. He's full of himself. He believes he is the author of life, that he can demand whatever he wants from people, and on a whim, sleep-deprived, grumpy, and angry, just decide that if he doesn't get what he wants, people will die. Even if what he wants is absolutely absurd. Let's keep going. Once more, they replied, "Let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it." I would like to think they're trying their best to be cordial, but they know that this is ridiculous. Then the king answered, "I am certain that you are trying to gain time, because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is only one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then, tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me." The astrologers answered the king, "There is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great and mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans." Remember that. This made the king so angry and furious that he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. Notice, not with anger and rebellion, but wisdom and tact. He asked the king's officer, "Why did the king issue such a harsh decree?" Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. Notice this reaction. I especially want to point out, notice Daniel, like I said, he doesn't go to anger. From what we can tell here, he doesn't even go to fear. Rather, Daniel, the man of God, the man who stands out in the story of Daniel, right, as being different because he is a man of God, when he's faced with Arioch, and notice, Arioch isn't just some guy saying, "Hey, you're in trouble, come with me." No, this man is coming to Daniel to murder him, and to murder him for no good reason. We know that this is all because Nebuchadnezzar is just acting like a tyrant, an evil, malicious tyrant. Daniel doesn't even know what's going on. He wasn't even a part of this conversation from what we can tell. But yet, rather than immediately going to anger or fear or fighting or quarreling, his first reaction is to seek understanding. At this, Daniel went into the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. So, not only does he react by seeking understanding, but once he figures out what the problem is, again, he doesn't go to anger, he doesn't go to fighting and quarreling. His reaction is to be a peacemaker. His reaction is to figure out how he can serve the king in order to bring peace. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven. This is so important. Remember, when the wise men of Babylon needed help from their gods, what was their response? Do you remember? They said, we can't know what only the gods can know because they don't hang out with us. They don't talk to us. We don't have a relationship with them. They said, Nebuchadnezzar, what you're asking for is so absurd because it's something only a God could know. And we are not gods, and the gods don't talk to us. But Daniel, when faced with this problem, he has a God that is different. He is Yahweh, the God of the Bible. And this God is distinctly different from the idol and false gods that the rest of the Babylonians follow, because he has relationship with his people. Which is important for us to remember today, because it's often a misconception that God's just off on a cloud in the distance watching, but not actually involved in this world. And I understand why it can feel that way sometimes. But the Bible, through this story, and especially through this piece right here, wants to make it abundantly clear. The God of the Bible, our God, Yahweh, he is different. He loves his people, and because he loves us, he shows us grace, and he has relationship with us. So when Daniel needed him the most, he wasn't hung out to dry like the other Babylonians, but God gives him what he needs to serve and to bring peace. And then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, "Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king." Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, "Do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him." Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, "I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what his dream means." The king said to Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, because Nebuchadnezzar changed his name, "Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it?" Daniel replied, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that passed through your mind as you were lying in bed are these. As your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come. And the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation and that you may understand what went through your mind. Your majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, and its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. The iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken to pieces and became like chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. This was the dream, and now we will interpret it to the king. Your majesty, you are the King of kings. The God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind and the beasts of the field and the birds in the sky, wherever they live. He has made you ruler over them all. You are the head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, the third kingdom, one of bronze, will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things to pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it. Even as you saw iron mixed with clay, as the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture and will not remain united, any more than iron mixes with clay. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. This is the meaning of the vision of the rock cut out of a mountain, but not by human hands, a rock that broke the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold to pieces. The great God has shown the king what will take place in the future. The dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel and paid him honor and ordered that an offering and incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery." Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished many gifts on him. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all its wise men. Moreover, at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego administrators over the province of Babylon, while Daniel himself remained at the royal court. Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? All right, what in the world is going on? So, before I really go into the explanation, I'll tell you something about myself. And many of you probably already know this, especially if you follow me on Facebook or talk to me for any length of time. Me and my wife, we absolutely love hiking. It's what we spend a lot of our free time doing in the summers. And for the most part, we're known for this, and everyone talks to us about it. And the reason why I imagine they do this is because they think it's what we spend all of our time doing, and we love it so much, which is true. We spend a lot of time doing it. But let me tell you something. Has anyone here ever done a long hike, like longer than 10 miles? Yeah, some of us, right? It's hard. And it's hard for the same reasons a short hike is hard. But when you do a really long hike, especially one over 10 miles or so, the difficulty just gets exacerbated because it's so long. And the truth is, as you're going up this mountain, going up this hill, especially a 14er, like for us, we'll start at like 4 in the morning. The sun hasn't even come up yet. And you're going up like thousands of vertical feet. And when you're doing this, it's terrible. It's really, really terrible. And the funny thing is, every time I do it, I actually really hate it. And it's ironic to me because I really do talk about hiking a lot and everyone thinks I love it. But the truth is when I'm doing it, I really, really hate it. And I ask myself every time, why do I keep doing this? My feet hurt. My knees hurt. And then especially when the sun does eventually come out and we're still above tree line, I mean, it's hot, we're sweaty, we're in direct sunlight. There's so many things about it that are actually not fun at all. In fact, the majority of the time, it's not fun. And then even we get home where things are nice and comfortable and our bodies are still in pain. Why do we keep doing this? It's the same reason Daniel 2 is telling us to keep persisting and following God. So we heard the dream, we heard the interpretation. The dream is there's this big statue made of different pieces, and then eventually it crumbles and breaks because a stone gets thrown at it, right? And Daniel makes it clear to Nebuchadnezzar that the statue is made of different pieces, of different types of metals, right? And at the top of it is this head of gold. And Nebuchadnezzar is supposed to be the head of gold. And what does that mean? Do you remember? He's called the King of Kings. Isn't that so interesting? Does anyone know who else is called King of Kings in the Bible? Yeah, exactly. Jesus. Jesus is called King of Kings. But yet right here, Nebuchadnezzar is being called King of Kings by God. Isn't that so weird? And to Nebuchadnezzar, this makes sense, right? The Bible is affirming exactly what he already believes, that he is the king of the world, that there's no one more powerful than him. And we know that he already believes this simply by how he's been acting so far. He's been acting like an evil tyrant who can do whatever he wants without consequence. He can decide whether people live or whether they die, because who in the world can stop him? And God is affirming, like, you feel this way because I put you here. You believe that you are the King of Kings, and you are, because I put you there. Because I have decided that you can rule like no other, you are able to do so. But he makes it clear that someday his kingdom will come to an end, and a lesser nation will come. And then that nation will come to an end, and then the lesser one will come, and so on and so forth. And Nebuchadnezzar, from his point of view, this probably isn't that informational. Like, he knows how the cycle goes. He's been a part of it. This is how he came into power. He is king, and he sits on this throne because he conquered and he destroyed. And it makes sense to him that someday his nation will go through that too. And it's probably pretty easy for him to not pay that as much mind as he should, right? And that's same goes for us, right? We all know that someday our bodies will be conquered. Someday we'll die. But the truth is, it doesn't often affect our day-to-day life because, we go through periods where we're young. We're in the prime of our life. And we know, we're going to die, but that's tomorrow's problem. It's not today's problem. And that's probably where Nebuchadnezzar sits. So he hears this dream, and he just simply hears Daniel say that this amazing, powerful God is just simply affirming what he already believes, that he is the most powerful king. He is the King of Kings. But what's ultimately important about this interpretation is Daniel's perspective. Just think of what this means for Daniel. Daniel isn't obsessed with the fact that Nebuchadnezzar is the head of gold. Remember, we talked about this last week. Daniel watched Nebuchadnezzar and his army come in and destroy his nation. His friends and his family probably died because of this man. And then what happens to Daniel? He's captured and taken from his home and made a slave to this foreign king in a faraway country. Daniel is probably relieved to know that, Nebuchadnezzar is the king right now, but not forever. See, Nebuchadnezzar probably hears this and gets puffed up, but Daniel hears this and is probably given hope when God says, here's the thing, Nebuchadnezzar. Right now, I've given you power. Right now, I'm allowing you to work as one of my agents. Which can sound odd to us, but it's true. The Bible says it over and over that God can use anyone, even evil people sometimes, if he so requires it. But if we're going to live in constant rebellion against God, it is only a matter of time until he knocks us down. And he is letting Daniel and the people of God know Nebuchadnezzar is in power. He is the King of Kings, but I know he is an evil man, and he will not rule forever. Why? Well, notice, God affirms, you're King of Kings, Nebuchadnezzar. You're as powerful as you think you are. But notice what comes out of Nebuchadnezzar's mouth, after he watches God demonstrate his power through Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar, what does he call God? He calls God God of gods, Lord of kings. He realizes, man, God has made me powerful, but this God is on another level. This God is truly greater than I. And Daniel gets to have hope, knowing that the world is pretty messed up right now, and God is not oblivious. And God is still in relationship with his people, and he is still working for them. And so God is using this dream to remind the people of God that he is with them and he will save them. Things might be pretty messed up right now, but I am God of gods, I am Lord of kings, and I will fix this. And someday, a kingdom will come that will never be destroyed. And he's not talking about Babylon. He's not talking about Rome. He's not even talking about us. He is talking about the kingdom that Jesus will lead. And so, as we begin really diving in to why this is helpful for us today, I want to start by reading this right here. This is Colossians 2:13 through 15, and it says this. He, and it's talking about Jesus, Jesus, forgave us all our sins, having canceled the charge of our legal indebtedness which stood against us and condemned us. He has taken it away, nailing it to the cross. And this is so important because remember, Daniel and the Israelites, they're in exile right now. They've been conquered by a foreign nation, and they are suffering because of their sins. God looked at them and said, you were supposed to be my holy people, but you're beginning to act a lot like Babylon. And he pleads with them to stop and to change, but they refuse. And so he brings them down. And he does so in a way that's humbling. He uses a foreign, evil nation to bring down God's nation that's supposed to be so good. And so this reality of Jesus that we have on this side of history is so important because it reminds us that, yeah, just like the Israelites, we have failed, but through Jesus, we can be made clean. Even though we've lived in rebellion with God, we can be one with him. We can be reunited with him. We can be a part of his family again. We can join this kingdom that will never be destroyed, this kingdom that will run with perfect peace and justice. But we keep going. We'll remember what I say often on this stage. That yes, Jesus came to forgive us of our sins and our past, but that is not the only reason Jesus came. Jesus came because our world is full of sin, and he is constantly rescuing us, not just from what we have done, but from all the sin of the world, all of the pressures and powers that work against us, all the pressures and powers that bring suffering and pain and death to our world. All of them will be fixed because the powers that run evil nations, the powers that bring pain and suffering will be defeated and replaced by a kingdom that is ran by a ruler who only allows justice, who is only good, and there will only be peace. And that person is Jesus. And it says here, finishing the verse, and having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. In other words, it's making clear, Jesus is this king to conquer all nations, to overthrow all evil kings and establish a perfect nation that is full of peace and justice and will never fall. And for us today, we need to remember this. Because even though it's like, man, that sounds pretty good, but I don't know if I believe it, Jesus reminds us about how his kingdom works sometimes. Remember, Jesus lived in a time of powerful people. He lived in the prime of the Roman Empire. And if you think about it, he was only alive for 30-something years. He only did ministry for 3 years. And the truth is, we don't know for sure, but he probably only had an impact on hundreds of people, maybe a few thousand people. Which, if you compare to today, how many people on Instagram have millions of followers, right? Yet Jesus only probably directly impacted maybe thousands. But that was enough for this powerful nation of Rome to say, you need to stop. But Jesus looked these powers in the eye, he looked them in the face, and he said, no. Because he knew that they were not King of Kings. He was King of Kings. And not only that, he was God of gods, he is Lord of kings. But what did they do? They gave him a crown of thorns. They put a robe on him of purple to mock him. And they gave him a scepter to mock him. And he was given a throne. And he was exalted before his people with an inscription exalting him as the King of the Jews. But this throne was a cross covered in his blood. And while he was exalted over his people, they laughed at him until he died. That is our God. This is the ruler that Nebuchadnezzar is being warned about. But the reason why this king gives us hope, the reason why this king brings fear to evil kings, is because Jesus was not like anyone else. Nebuchadnezzar believes he has the power of life and death because no one can stop him. But he's dead today. Jesus believes he has the power of life and death because when they laid his dead, lifeless body in a tomb, he walked out of it, fully alive and fully healed. The kings of this world, their power is only as strong as death. The strongest thing they can do is kill their enemies. Jesus, God, he can kill his enemies, but he's even greater. He can heal and bring life to his enemies. That's why we trust and put our hope in him. And what we need to learn from this story today is when we look around and we feel like Daniel, like things are just falling apart and we're totally and utterly out of control, we need to trust that God will fix things, that the powers that are in control will not always be in control. And we trust that this is true because Jesus has already proven that he has come and he has the power to save. Because the same powers of evil that were ruling in Daniel's day were ruling in Jesus' day, and they killed him. But he walked out of his grave because he is in fact the king who can save. And what's his promise to us today? That he is coming back. And he will finish the work that he started. And so the same hope that Daniel had back then is the same hope that we have today. That when things seem awful and out of control, and there's nothing we can do about it, we can have hope that it will be okay. Because God, the God of gods, the Lord of kings, has the power to fix things, and he will. So, when we read the news, when we talk with coworkers that don't believe what we believe, and we begin to get angry or scared, and we're just confronted face to face with how evil our world truly is, our reaction cannot be anger and a desire to fight back. Our desire cannot be yelling and screaming and posting mean and nasty Facebook comments. Rather, we need to be like Daniel. We need to be peacemakers, seeking understanding, and we need to be patient. Can we do that? Can we trust that Jesus will fix things, even if he fixes it after we die? Because let's face it, that is incredibly hard to do. It's incredibly hard to be peacemakers and to be patient when what we're waiting for may happen later. I don't know about you, but I like change. When I see a problem, I like to fix it fast, right away. And I think that's true for a lot of us. But Jesus is saying that we don't get to always have it our way, and that he's going to fix things his way and on his time. And so the truth that we as Christians need to be committed to is being peacemakers and being patient, having hope that God will fix this, but he'll fix it on his time. And that we can stay committed to being patient, even if Jesus acts when we don't get to see it. Can we do that? It's a hard ask, but it's what God is asking us to do as people following God in an ungodly world. We need to be peacemakers, living patiently. Will you pray with me?